My husband's sudden change made me suspicious, so I uncovered his affair. Now, a stranger is telling me the man in my house isn't my husband, and I'm terrified she's right. Ethan and I had been together for a decade, married for 6 of those years. He had been by my side through my entire adult life. We started dating when I was just 17, and he was 18. I always believed he was my soulmate, the one I wanted to grow old with, but I was mistaken. When I finally learned the truth, it hit me like a freight train. Sure, Ethan had been coming home later than usual, and his excuses were always flimsy at best. I'm not naive. I had my doubts, but deep down, I just couldn't face the possibility that my husband might be involved with someone else. Honestly, I might have gone on like that for years, but Ethan got careless. "Welcome home, sweetheart. Another fun night out with the guys after work?" I asked as he walked in. "Yeah," Ethan mumbled, barely acknowledging me as he brushed past. "I made dinner beef tips and rice. I know it's one of your favorites," I offered, hoping to spend a little time together. "Ate at the bar. I'm heading to bed," he muttered, steadying himself against the wall before stumbling up the stairs. My heart sank. Nights like these were becoming more frequent. I loved Ethan deeply, and all I wanted was to spend some quality time with him after a long day, but he couldn't even give me a few minutes. As I watched him trudge up the stairs, a tear slipped down my cheek, but in a flash, my sadness turned into a fiery anger. Because when Ethan walked under the light in the hallway, I saw what looked like a hickey on his neck. A storm of emotions crashed over me: despair, resentment, betrayal. It was like getting hit by a ton of bricks. I was stunned, unsure of what to do next. How could I? The man I had been head over heels for had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I was in utter disbelief. I stumbled into the kitchen, pulling out a chair before I collapsed into it. I stared blankly into the distance, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, lost in thought. Eventually, I felt numb, like my entire being had been drained away, leaving behind just an empty shell. Then a thought flickered across my mind. I had to be wrong. It must have been a trick of the light. The hallway was dimly lit, after all. Whatever it was, I needed to know for sure. I tiptoed upstairs, abandoning the dinner I had made. I crept up to our bedroom as quiet as a mouse and gently pushed open the door. Ethan was already fast asleep. I didn't waste a moment. I hurried across the room, avoiding any creaky floorboards, and checked Ethan's neck. His snores grew louder as I got closer. He was always a deep sleeper. I cursed under my breath when I realized he was sleeping on his side, making it impossible for me to see the other side of his neck. I glanced around, desperate for any sign of the truth. My eyes landed on the bedside table. Bingo. I grabbed Ethan's phone from the charger, my heart racing. I held my breath as I used his thumb to unlock it. A rush of adrenaline surged through me as the screen lit up. "Wah," Ethan mumbled, his eyes flickering open for a second as I froze in place. My heart stopped, and I prayed he'd drift back to sleep. To my relief, he did. Ethan mumbled something incoherent, pulled the covers up, and dozed off again. I'd barely escaped getting caught. I knew I had to be more careful. The first thing I did was check his texts. Immediately, a name I didn't recognize popped up. My heart shattered as I read the messages. "Hey baby, last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again after work today. You're damn right. I wish you didn't have to go. But what about your wife? Won't she get suspicious?" Her? Not a chance. Even if she finds out, she won't leave. I could do the worst thing imaginable, and she'd still think I'm a saint. A deep, burning anger welled up inside me. Did Ethan really think so little of me? Did he truly see me as some weak, spineless person who would never stand up for herself? Well, I'd prove him wrong. I quickly snapped screenshots of the evidence, scrolling through countless nude photos that definitely weren't from me, and sent everything to my own phone. Afterward, I carefully deleted any trace of my snooping and placed Ethan's phone back on the charger. Fueled by a mix of anger and heartbreak, I stormed out of the room, grabbing my keys on the way out. But as I made it halfway across the living room, a sobering realization hit me. I had nowhere to go. My family lived 7 hours away. It was too late to find a decent hotel, and I wasn't ready to drag my friends into this mess. Not yet, at least. That left me with only one option. I had to crash on the couch. I sank onto the sofa and let out a deep sigh. As much as I didn't want to face it, I knew what I had to do. First thing in the morning, I was going to find a lawyer and start the divorce process. The very thought of it shattered me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't hold back the flood of tears. I cried like a child, silently sobbing into the scratchy throw pillow for what felt like hours. By the time the tears stopped, my eyes were puffy and sore. I couldn't imagine falling asleep in that state, but at some point I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the blinds. "Morning, babe. How'd you?" The rest of my words caught in my throat. That's right. Ethan and I were on the verge of ending everything. I reached for my phone on the coffee table, tears stinging at the corners of my eyes. I needed to see the texts I'd sent myself, proof that the last 12 hours hadn't been some twisted nightmare. But the messages were gone. My eyes widened as I stared at the blank screen. That couldn't be right. They had been there, plain as day, just the night before. Something was seriously off. I suddenly paused, sitting bolt upright. Was that Vijay's breakfast? The enticing smell of eggs and bacon floated around the corner from the kitchen. My eyebrows knit together in confusion. Ethan never cooked. My breath came in shallow gasps as I cautiously made my way toward the kitchen. Curiosity gnawed at me like a hungry piranha. I peeked around the corner, unsure of what I'd find. To my utter shock, there was my husband, humming a little tune while flipping pancakes. I rubbed my eyes. Was I hallucinating from lack of sleep? That had to be it. Then, Ethan turned, his piercing blue eyes locking onto mine. "Morning, princess. I hope you're hungry. I saw you sleeping on the couch and I figured you might not be feeling well, so I thought I'd whip up a hot breakfast to help you feel better." My heart skipped a beat. Was this really my husband? He looked like him. He even sounded like him. But something felt VDJ plush off. Yeah, just a bit under the weather. Are you feeling okay? You're, acting vigilant or different. Never felt better. Honestly, I think I've really turned over a new leaf, he said, placing a steaming plate in front of me. The old Ethan is gone. From now on, I swear I'm going to be the best husband I can be. Our eyes met, and I searched his face for any sign of deception. He seemed sincere. If this was a performance, it was an incredibly convincing one. "Thanks, babe. That really means a lot to hear," I replied cautiously. Ethan's smile lit up the room, the warmth of it seeping into my heart. It had been years since he'd looked at me like that. "Well, get used to it because I'm serious. I love you, Annie." I wanted to be wary. I wanted to stay quiet. I wanted to keep my guard up. But how could I? All I'd ever wanted was love and attention, and here he was giving it to me. For the first time in ages, it felt like my husband actually cared. "I love you too, Ethan," I mumbled, before taking a bite of the meal he'd made for me. A big part of me couldn't shake the feeling of unease around Ethan. The timing of his sudden change was just too convenient. But despite my lingering doubts, Ethan seemed committed to his promise. He started taking me out on dates, paid for my nails to get done, brought me flowers. He even took on most of the house chores. I couldn't deny that I was impressed. If he had kept that up, I might never have suspected anything. But one night he slipped. We were cuddled up on the couch, watching The Truman Show, when I decided to ask a question. Now I wish I'd just kept quiet. "Hey, babe." "Yes, my love?" Ethan responded, his eyes still glued to the TV. If someone close to you was an imposter like, A perfect replica except for a few tiny differences. Do you think you'd notice? Ethan stiffened, his eyes going wide as he slowly turned to face me. A blank stare replaced his usual expression, sending a chill down my spine. He was starting to scare me. I suppose so, VJJ. Why do you ask? His voice was flat, laced with an unsettling urgency. I didn't know how to make sense of his sudden change. It's just the premise of the movie we're watching, VJJ Saish. I watched as the tension drained from his face, and he let out a sigh of relief. I raised an eyebrow, puzzled by his strange reaction. Right, that makes sense. We sat in awkward silence, our attention half-heartedly returning to the TV. But after a few more tense moments, I couldn't take it any longer. I've got to use the restroom and charge my phone. I'll be right back. No need to pause the movie. Ethan nodded, flashing a grin up at me. His smile, sigh. Had his teeth always been that straight? Okay, baby girl, hurry back. Wouldn't want your spot to get cold. Yeah, sure thing. I practically bolted up the stairs, locking myself in our bedroom. I leaned against the door, trying to calm my racing heart. What was going on? Was it just me, or was Ethan's behavior seriously off? I needed a moment to collect myself. I closed my eyes, focusing on steadying my breathing, when I heard it, my phone buzzing in my pocket. I quickly pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Normally, I don't answer calls from numbers I don't recognize, but something told me to pick up this time. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe I just needed to talk to someone, anyone other than my husband. I hesitated, then accepted the call. Hello? Annie? Annie Williams? Speaking. Listen, this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to hear me out. A VJJ, okay? Suddenly, I jumped to my feet, staring at the locked door separating me from the hallway. Loud knocks echoed through the room, making the doorframe rattle. Annie, who are you talking to? Panic surged through me as I scrambled for a response. It's my mom. Go back downstairs, I'll be there in a minute. That was him, wasn't it? The caller said. That was my husband, yes. Why do you ask? I whispered, moving as far away from the door as possible. Annie, you need to listen to me. Can you promise me that you will? The pounding on the other side of the door grew even louder. Annie, don't listen to her. She's lying. My stomach twisted into knots. How did he know? I'm listening. I'll hear you out, I replied, my voice trembling. The woman on the other end of the line let out a relieved sigh. Okay, my name is Adeline, and Ethan and I have been together for about 9 months. The man in your house is not your husband. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me, my entire body trembling. No, that couldn't be true. In a shaky voice, I asked the question that would haunt me forever. How do I know you're telling the truth? There was a long pause, the banging outside my door growing more frantic. When Adeline finally spoke, I knew with absolute certainty that I was in serious danger. Annie, for the past week, Ethan has been living with me.